Welcome to Module 3. So in this module, we're going to be talking about Chapter 8, which is product strategy, and Chapter 9, which is price. So here are our Chapter 8 learning objectives. And so we're looking at the products and services. What are the differences between those? How do we form product lines? And the product life cycle, as well as some branding strategies. So the focus of marketing revolves around the products and services to meet customers' needs. So products can be divided into two groups: non-durable goods and durable goods. So durable goods are things that, like a car that hangs around for a while, and non-durable goods are not. So in healthcare, we have a wide range of activities and services. And so some of those are intangible in a way. So we have to think of those in a little different way in order to meet our customers' needs. Looking at products and services, we can look at it in three different ways. And so one way is starting with the core service, but the actual product in the mind of the customer has to do with levels of features, of quality, brand name, scheduling. But in addition, we look at augmented services. So how do we maybe how someone finances it, what's the support behind it, and are there ways that the customer can complain? So we're going to start with looking at services. And when we think of services, we think of these 5 I's. And so services are intangible. They can't be felt, touched, or heard before they're encountered. They're inconsistent because we're talking about people. So you cannot separate inseparability the people from the service. And so that creates a real challenge for us in that our people are our service in a way. And so they're so crucial to how the service is delivered. Generally, in terms of products, we think in terms of inventory, and we don't really have inventory. Now, maybe we have capacity. So think of a hospital unit, let's say it has 20 beds. And so in a way, that's kind of our inventory. And so it may have some impact on us in terms of how we market. If we have excess capacity, then we may want to think of some different strategies to fill those beds. And then last, it's interaction with customers. So a service is the quality of that interaction. Another way that we often talk about this in marketing is experience. So these services are experienced, and so we want to manage that experience. And so that's why, remember in the last unit, we talked about these blueprints and doing this blueprint or flow chart of your practice or service. And so you can look at all the different places where a customer and the medical staff interact. So our question is, what services should we offer? And so all businesses must decide which products or services they're going to offer. And they're going to think about this in terms of the breadth and the depth. And that's very true in the hospital business. So some of us are in community hospitals. We do a little bit of everything. But there are other hospitals that focus more on a single product line, like cancer or children's services or rehab services. We have some heart hospitals, orthopedic hospitals. And so within all of this, we have to decide, if you'll remember, we talked about this in introduction, the focused factories, the work we did with Herzlinger. So looking at both the breadth and the depth of the product mix. And so are we going to be somebody that has multiple product lines and items or not? Another example of this would be Cabarrus Eye Center. So they could just be a bunch of ophthalmologists that have their practice there in the building, and perhaps they go to the hospital to do surgery. But at that practice, they've brought the surgery into their practice. And so they do their outpatient surgery right there in that facility. Same is true of some gastroenterology practices where they're scoping right there in the practice. So these are the kinds of decisions that we make in terms of our products. Here's just this is one way that in the business world they use this GE portfolio matrix with strategic business units. And so you can analyze, look at your facility. So 2 dimensions. The first is business strength. What are we strong at? What are we medium at? What are we weak at? Matching that with market attractiveness. And so how attractive is that market? High, medium, or low? So we'll have a hypothetical facility here, and perhaps they have some excellent plastic surgeons. And so they are, let's pretend like we're in Hollywood. Why not? So that the demand is very high, the market attractiveness is high, and so we definitely want to make sure we have that business strength. So those 2 match. But we might see something else in terms of our business strength, say with mammography. Maybe we're really good at screening mammography, and in terms of our business strength, maybe not quite as strong with diagnostic mammography, but the market is bigger for diagnostic, maybe because of the age, than the screening. So you look at this. We might have a service that we are weak in it, and the attractiveness is low. So that's common in many communities. There's not a really strong pediatric service there in the hospital because there isn't a big market for it. And so we just don't have that competency. So often what we do is say, hey, we're not even going to try to serve this. We're going to refer these patients over to a specialized facility, the children's hospital, or it could be the burn unit. We're going to bring them in, we're going to stabilize them. We do not have the facilities for burn patients. It's not an attractive market for us, and so we're going to refer that out. So we use this analysis to decide which products that we're going to specialize in. Now, in looking at products, one of the key marketing things we always look at is the product life cycle. And so technically there are 4 stages that a product goes through with introduction, growth, maturity, and decline. And so there are different ways that we look at products depending on which of these stages that they're in. Now, with that being said, we could also talk about our patients' life cycles. And so there are certain things that we would do with babies as compared to geriatric patients. And so the introduction is when we're first rolling it out. Growth, things are increasing rapidly, and so we're doing a lot of sales. But then it matures and begins to slow. And then decline, we're going to harvest what we can out of that, squeeze the profitability that's in there. And this is in traditional marketing. So in healthcare, there may be some services that this is true of, but it may be that we continue to offer all services to all people. Now, when we were talking about this in an earlier chapter, we were talking about Netflix. And in terms of when they got to the maturity phase of their let's send you a video in the mailbox, they reinvented themselves. And so that's always a possibility here. We can modify the product life cycle by modifying our product. We can modify the market. We can reposition the product. So there are ways that we can recycle this cycle as well. So next we're going to talk a little bit about brands and branding. Brand is a noun, branding is a verb. So the brand is any name, color, term, a symbol that distinguishes one seller's product from another. Probably this here, Race for the Cure, the Susan G. Komen Foundation. Would you not agree that that is symbolized by the color pink? Okay, so they have taken a color and a ribbon. Now, there are many copycats, right, on this. So now most diseases have a color associated with them too. These people picked on red then. And so there are ways that we establish our brand. Trademark is the brand name or trade name given for legal protection. So I think Race for the Cure has a trademark as well. So you'll see a lot of these organizations have actually trademarked their name. Then we also sometimes establish taglines associated with our product or service. And so here's just a few of them. Let's see if you can match these up. Together we can save a life. Okay, so that is Red Cross. My blank blank hospital saved my life. And so I think that one is this one. To eradicate blank blank through research, screening, education, and treatment. And that's the Susan G. Komen Foundation. Learn and live. Okay, learn and live. Isn't that a very strange tagline? What does that mean? And so I like to throw that in there. It is the Heart Association, but sometimes who knows who created these things, but I just never thought that made any sense. All right, our purpose is to prevent blank and reduce its effects. And actually, that one is number 5 here. And the blank blank part, this is actually number 2 right here. My Children's Miracle Network Hospital. Okay, saved my life. All right, so the point being here, sometimes we get a little too cute. And so some of these things can be meaningful. Probably of all of these, the one that, now these are shorter. A tagline is shorter than a mission statement because people aren't going to take the time to read your mission statement. But a tagline is kind of a clever way. Probably Live Strong would be a good one. Just Do It would be a strong one for Nike. So there are some really strong taglines that have really been successful in reinforcing brands. So there's different ways that we can go about a branding strategy. And so some of these, sometimes we have a multi-product strategy, sometimes a multi-brand strategy. So for example, P&G has a lot of different brands, very strong brands. Tide, Cheer, Ivory Snow. So they make a bunch of different clothes cleaning products. And so they all have kind of a different brand identity associated with them. Sometimes we mix our brands through what I would call our distribution channels. So Sears and Craftsman and Kenmore. So Kenmore and Craftsman tools are strong association with Sears. And sometimes we co-brand. So like Lexus started making Coach luggage leather seats. And so we can do it along with another brand. And it's not a bad idea if you know of an organization that has a really strong brand, to brand yourself with that organization in some way. All right, but most of us have, and we have this branding question in hospitals. We have it in universities. So we have that question. even within our department, when we have these kinds of discussions, what are we branding? Are we branding Appalachian State University, the College of Health Sciences, the Department of Healthcare Management, or the Healthcare Management MHA program? So those are all different. And so when we've been trying to set up the communications for this new product launching that we do, our college was branding everything under the College of Health Sciences. Now, I'm not suggesting you don't care about the College of Health Sciences, but you're choosing the program. You're not choosing the college. One of the things that, as educated people, you've probably seen this in other classes, and it's kind of a classic in terms of looking at theories or frameworks, and that's the diffusion of innovation. We talked about innovation some in the earlier class, but if you're launching a new product or service, it's kind of like a product life cycle in a way, but what this is showing is how much time it takes for people to start trying a service. This actually came across in agricultural initially with hybrid corn. I always think Facebook is an interesting example. It's been around for a while. People have been using it for a while, but now Meemaw's on Facebook. And so Meemaw was late majority, maybe a laggard. There are also going to be people that never use your service. But if we've got some new kind of screening technique, mammography, maybe when we were first initiating that, it took a while to ramp up to get different people to start using that service. So things that affect, will people use your new product or service? Does it have an advantage? Is it compatible with other things about them or other services? How complex is it? So back to my KISS rule, make things as simple as possible. Can you separate that out from other services? Can you communicate about it? Can you market it to a large group? So this might be like a physician practice where it's not a multi-specialty, they're all orthopedic. So homophilous groups would be all orthopedic people. So they're all the same, so you can kind of expect them to make changes in services. And something like this is really important. I'm actually old enough that when my hospital first got its MRI, and so we had to go and sell the MRI services and why they should use that as opposed to CAT scan, for example. Same thing with PET scan. So now we've got PET. Why should you use PET instead of these other two? What are the advantages, disadvantages? And so those would be some examples there. And so pace of innovation, are we just overwhelmed with choices? And so what are the norms, roles, and social networks? Social networks being important here. So once again, that relationship management. And then the infrastructure you have involved. All right, we're going to switch over now to our second topic in this unit, which is pricing. And so with this, we're going to explore kind of a difficult topic in healthcare, which is pricing. And the reason why do I say that? Well, pricing is unique in healthcare because in so many ways we don't really set our own prices. Our prices are negotiated through managed care contracts. There is no negotiating with Medicare, and there's no negotiation with Medicaid. So we've got a big segment of our customers. We have fixed pricing in advance. Then we have some negotiation with these managed care companies, but there are a few maybe commercial insurance or private payers where we actually set some prices. So let's take a look at this. So what is price? So what we're talking about is the level of monetary reimbursement that you can get for your goods or services, and it's an economic value. Your price should be established that corresponds to the level of value that the consumer perceives in the service being offered. And so once again, we talked about the expectations. If you think you're going into a Four Seasons hotel, there are certain things that you expect. And so it can affect consumer demand and consumer response. So in pricing, let's look at this list here. So to some extent, it depends on what kind of service. And I know you all represent many different kinds of services. So let's look at a couple of them. Medical practice. So you've got a lot of, probably most of your patients have some form of insurance. And so that's going to be negotiated in advance. And we're not going to do a whole lot of pricing there. Now, you may have some uninsured patients, but probably not too many. If you have uninsured patients today in America, there's kind of two segments there that we could think about. Why is someone uninsured? When I lived in Dallas, my next door neighbor was a multimillionaire, and she did not have health insurance. She's like, I have cash. If I need something, I'm really healthy, I'll just pay cash for it. So that's one kind of person without insurance. But for the most part, it's somebody who's down on their luck or falling between the cracks, or they just lost their job, or had a terrible illness. I mean, so there's a lot of reasons why people are uninsured, but it's not most of our population. The Affordable Care Act, as we know, tried to rectify some of that, but as we continue with healthcare reform, we'll have to see what the impact is on that. But for most part, you're not just setting prices, okay? Now, what about if you're a psychologist? Well, if you're a psychologist, you might accept insurance or you might not. And so you may set your own prices and it be on a cash-only basis. How about dentists? Some dentists accept insurance, but a lot of old established dentists don't. And so once again, you have to have cash. And so they have to come up with a pricing strategy. So some of what we'll talk about will make more sense with that kind of pricing. Same thing with a plastic surgeon, but we've got two different kinds. It could be that we're located there in Hollywood and there's a big demand for cash cosmetic surgery. Or it could be that you're a plastic surgeon that's dealing with reconstruction. It could be as a result of breast cancer. You might be doing breast reconstruction. You might be doing face reconstruction from injury, etc. Hospitals. So once again, hospitals for the most part, they're going to those prices are going to be set for them through Medicare, managed care, and Medicaid. There may be some segment of uninsured patients once again. So I was helping somebody who was uninsured deal with a very expensive hospital bill. So needed a surgery, was uninsured. The surgery was going to be about $120,000. Okay. So, so I suggested, well, if you were going to pay cash for this, then you need to go and negotiate a discount. And we'll talk about discounts a little bit later. And so indeed, this hospital did offer, if you paid right away for this surgery, they would give you a 40% discount. And so I told my friend, this is the best deal you're going to get. So go ahead, cash in your retirement, and get this 40% discount. Now, if you paid for the surgery over time in a monthly payment plan, over, I think it was 2 years, they were going to give you a 20% discount. And so once again, I'm like, no, take the 40% and just be done with it. So that kind of negotiation does happen for a small segment of people. Emergency room, that's going to be 2 different categories. Most people are going to be insured. As you know, that pricing is very high. Those deductibles are very high because they don't want you to go there. So those really high deductibles are ways that we keep people out of the emergency room. But a minor care center may or may not be paid for by your insurance, but so it may do some actual pricing things. Pharmacy, we're all familiar with this. And so there's a big variation. You can shop around from pharmacy to pharmacy for different drugs, and different pharmacies price different drugs at different levels. Long-term care, once again, if you're not Medicaid and you're not doing skilled nursing, then this is going to be a out-of-pocket direct cost as well. All right, so what are some trends in pricing? Well, one of the trends we could definitely talk about is transparency. So I know Blue Cross and Blue Shield of North Carolina, if you're looking for a service, you can go on their webpage and plug in that service and get some averages of what you should expect to pay for that price. So the thinking is that will make us better consumers. We can be better consumers, better shoppers when we know what the price is. And so that way, some things we could negotiate. So some ways that we do pricing, and this is really from your finance class, but these are different ways that we're reimbursed in healthcare. So cost-based is one, fee-for-service, DRGs, capitation, and pay-for-performance. So you'll be familiar with all of those from finance. But so as you know, we get paid in a lot of different ways, and it's part of what adds the complexity to our system because there are so many different ways. So in establishing the price, there's actually a process that we can go through. And so first you need to know, what are your constraints? What are you trying to accomplish? You want to look at demand versus revenue, and we'll take a look at that. Start with cost. What does it cost you to provide it? Then you need to be able to analyze those volume and profit relationships to understand where your break even is. So particularly for something like, let's say you're adding a new piece of equipment, like when we first added MRI. So we needed to know what our fixed costs were, what our variable costs were going to be, and so estimate a volume that we needed to cover those fixed and variable costs. And so when you have all that analysis, then you can set a pricing strategy. And the last part we're going to look at is how price affects positioning in some ways as well. So some of the constraints that we might face is basic supply and demand with economics, and what are our production costs, but also what's our market structure? Are we a monopoly? Okay, so cable companies can do certain things because we don't have good competition and we don't have good substitutes. And so that, in effect, in the laws of supply and demand, when there is pure competition, then pricing should go down. But as we know here in healthcare, that we're not in a pure competition, we're a quasi-competitive system, and so prices have not gone down. So looking at some of the strategies that we could choose, this is from a different author, not from our author, but this is what you want to match up. Okay, so sometimes if the quality is really high, then you can charge a high premium. So plastic surgery would probably be a good example of this. If the quality is medium and you charge a high price, then people are going to feel overcharged or worse, ripped off. And so we can match all of these up. For low price, if we get high quality, this is what we all want. We want this super value where we find something that's just great quality and the price is low. But generally we look at if we can get a low price at medium value, then we feel like that's good. And then low and low is just pure economy. And this is in our healthcare system, we have this question. Is everybody going to drive the Lexus, or are we willing to have more of a two-tier system? So this is some other information on how our industry structure can impact our price. And so if we look at this one here, high buyer power depresses prices. That should just jump out at you that we're talking about Medicare, right? So Medicare is the high buyer. And because of that, they can pay really low prices. If we get into rivalries, we may chase each other with pricing. We certainly see this a lot in other industries, phone industries, computers, etc. Healthcare, not so much. If we have some unused capacity, then we can look at some pricing strategies there. So we look at our pricing objective, and what is it? Is it we want market share, we want sales, we want profit, we want image? And this is really important here. Just a quick story. When I had my own consulting firm for 10 years. And so when I was first starting out, I went to one of my mentors and thinking, I got to figure out what to charge people for these services. Mostly I was writing business plans. So I had a pricing strategy for my services, and I thought it was really smart because I was going to undercut the big 8 accounting firms and provide the same service at a much lower price. And his vision was, you will get no customers then, because you need to charge a really high price or they're not going to think that you're any good. And so I doubled what I was charging people, and I got the business. And so you need to understand this. It was such an important lesson for me. But they'll do this with perfume, that they'll take a really expensive perfume. They'll take a perfume and they'll put it in a real expensive bottle and package, and the same perfume in a not so fancy package and a lot lower price. And research is clear. People prefer the expensive perfume. So it's something about human nature that you've got to understand there as well. So stabilization would be our last with this. And so another part of this is estimating demand and revenue. Now, what is true about pricing? For the most part, for most of you, particularly if you're in a hospital, you're going to have finance people, and they're going to be doing a lot of this. However, sometimes marketing comes in to kind of temper the pure economic way that they sometimes do the analysis. And so as a marketer, we would come in and help the finance people understand the price sensitivity, the price elasticity, and looking at matching, are there points at which our volumes will decrease based on our pricing structure. So here's some simple approaches. If you ever need to do pricing, the simplest is first figuring out what your costs are and then put some profit on it. Okay, so that's the very simplest approach that you can use. A little bit more sophisticated is marginal cost pricing, where you've covered your fixed costs. Let's say it's an MRI. And so we've been doing it for 3 years now, and we've covered our fixed price and our variable costs and with our existing patient base, and we have a chance to maybe do some special Medicaid clients or something. And so we could price it a little bit lower to them because our fixed cost is already covered, and we just need to cover those variable costs. So that's what marginal cost pricing is, and hopefully you understand that at this point. Some also do markup pricing. A lot of you'd be surprised, but in a lot of basic consumer goods, the price is about double the cost to the markup is about another 100% of what it costs to produce it. So some other strategies that we can use are discounts, based on volume. That's basically what managed care is doing. And so they're discounting it in some kind of fixed reimbursement mechanism, not so much as a percentage, though that's what they started out. But this would also be the example that I talked about with the person that was going to pay cash, also negotiated a discount. Sometimes there's seasonal, center of excellence contracting. So these are strategies that you could see work well in the airline industry, the hotel industry, other kinds of things, but maybe not so much in healthcare. So this slide here, this last one, we're talking about the positioning value of price. And so as we talked about, we've got to know how competitive our environment is and where our product, what our position is in the market in establishing this. And so to match that in terms of our promotional strategies, and so whether that's even possible. But as we were saying, in the consumer's mind, they are looking for this matchup in terms of what their understanding or expectation is in terms of quality and what the cost is. And so here's an example real quick of how we see this sometimes in healthcare or in hospitals in particular. So a patient will go in there and they'll see that the daily charge for this room is $200, $400, $250. And so in their mind, they're like, I could be staying at the Four Seasons Hotel for that. Why does my hospital room not look like the Four Seasons Hotel? But in fact, we started chasing having our hospitals look like the Four Seasons Hotel. So that was where some of that got started from, of these expectations, and when we were trying to do a little bit more customer-driven approach to hospitals. And now what goes into that, though, it's not like we charge every time a nurse comes in your room. We don't scan it with the barcode and say, okay, 10 minutes for giving you this pill. All the stuff we do, we're scanning those $80 aspirin and the $50 disposable thermometer and all that kind of stuff. But the service part of it, we don't. All right, so in conclusion, pricing is really challenging for us in healthcare. In some ways, we don't have flexibility. We do continue to have charges for all of our different services, but there's little relationship between what we charge and the reimbursement. And so that gap has widened a lot. But I think that though we've run through this pretty quickly, there's more detail in your book, and you'll get some sense for the service that you're trying to do, a pricing strategy of what some options are there. But hopefully there's a few new things that you never really thought of, not only for you in your as you are working in your jobs, but also for you as a consumer. So, all right, that's the end of this.